Hello everybody and welcome back to the Beads of Paradise YouTube channel. Today we're going to do a little tutorial on how to do adjustable slip knots. What is that, you ask? That is when you have a necklace, or it could be a bracelet, it could be pretty much anything with these two little knots at the back, and then you pull them to adjust the length. So that way you could pull it over your head, pull these two little knots, and adjust it to any length you want. So if I want to wear it as a choker, I could wear it as a choker, or I could pull it as long as it is so that it hangs closer to down here. And that is actually how all the necklaces that I'm wearing today were closed. So that's why you can see that big chunky knot on this big chunky piece right here. Why use slip knots, you ask? Well, there's a ton of reasons. One of the reasons I like best is if you're indecisive and you don't know what length you want to wear your necklace, or you sort of want to be able to vary it, because some days maybe you want to wear it really short, some days you want to wear it long, you want to layer it with other pieces so that, it sits below this piece as opposed to sitting at the same length, or you want to wear it very long. So adjustable knots give you a whole lot of leeway to work with the length that your piece is. So that is awesome. Another thing that's great is that it doesn't involve like a metal clasp or a clasp, period. So this is also a great thing to use for a piece that you're pretty much never going to take off, which is what I do with these. These are pretty much permanent jewelry. I wear them until they break. And because they're on the nylon, which is one of the strongest cords that we sell, it usually lasts for a year or more before they break. The thicker ones will last even longer. So the slip knots are wonderful on many materials. I like them on the nylon. That's what we're going to show it on today. But could also work on like a leather cord, though a deerskin leather and a suede's not going to work quite as great because it's not going to slide very well. So when you're doing the sliding knots, you want to make sure it's on a cord in which those little knots will slide. And it may take some trial and error until you get that right. Totally normal. You could also use it on waxed cotton cord, satin cord. Pretty much you could try it on anything and see what works for you. So we're going to be using nylon for our example today, and I didn't just want to do it on a basic cord, so I went up and I got a bead so that we can make this into an official necklace. So went up and I grabbed this really cool bead and this cord that I think kind of goes fun with it. And that's about a yard of cord that we're going to be working with today to make a necklace. And if, like me, you're like, hey, that bead's pretty cool, I'm going to do a quick little 30-second little demonstration on what this bead is, where it came from, and its history. These beautiful beads are called Kifa-style beads from tribal areas in Afghanistan and are made from recycled materials such as glass, bottle shards, broken beads, and pottery fragments. These materials are then ground into a fine powder and suspended in a binder, often gum arabic. Later, they are sculpted into beautiful shapes and patterns and finally fused over hot coals, often without any molds. These guys are from around the 1940s to the 1960s. Alrighty, so let's get back to creating our really awesome necklace with slip knots. So to start, we have our yard length of cord, and you're always going to want to have a good deal more cord than you need. And so then I'm going to take my cord and I'm going to eyeball. You might want to use a measuring tape though, because this is going to want to go over your head. I can sort of eyeball it because I've been doing it forever. But usually for women it'll be about like 21 inches or so. For men you're going to give 23, 24 inches. So, but you can measure your own head to make sure it will go over it. So I'm going to take my cord, get it even, and then I'm going to fold these two sides over each other so that they're basically sitting parallel. And so at the longest length, and I'm going to eyeball it, and this I'm pretty sure is big enough to go over your head. Well, maybe I'll give it a little bit more room. So I have these two sides sitting flat. Alrighty, so now that we have our cord sitting flat like this, I'm going to grab it at the longest length that it's going to be. So you might want to measure that out before you really start tying anything together. And I'm eyeballing this. I think I can get this over my head. And so you want to make sure you have a good amount of cord on each side, especially if you're pretty new to this, so you can experiment. And so I start out by taking the cord that is facing to my right, because I'm a righty. It might be different if you're a lefty, but basically we're going to be winding our cord over a finger to the left. So I have my little finger here, and I'm taking my cord that is facing, that is closest to me, and I'm going to be winding it around my finger. And you could do as little as 1 knot for your slip knot, to 3 or more. I'm going to do 2 today. So I wind it over my finger, and I'm using my finger to make sure that I'm keeping that space there, because what we're going to do next is we're going to go over 1 more, and I'm going to slip this off my finger. So you see we have that little knot space there, and then I'm going to pull my cord under that. So again, the cord that it's going to be sliding on is basically, we're not really thinking about it, and we're just essentially creating a little loop with our cord. And see, as it's pretty loose right now, we're just going to pull it to tighten it. And you want to guide it a little bit, and you want to pull this so that it's pretty tight, but not too tight, because if you pull it really, really tight, it's going to be much harder to slide. If it's too loose, it's going to slip a lot. So then we're going to flip that to the other side, because we want to make sure, at least I do, there's probably a bunch of ways to do this, but this is how I commonly do it. I start out with the cord facing toward the closest towards me and to my right, again, because I'm a righty. And so we just do the same thing on the other side. So again, I'm using my finger here as a guide, and I'm just winding once, twice, and then I'm taking the rest of the cord and I'm loosening it off my finger. So I have these 2 little loops right here, and I'm tucking my cord under and then pulling it tight. And the great thing is you can always keep doing and undoing this until you get it right. It might take a few times to get the right form down, the right size, the right shape, the right length, because sometimes you'll need to go and adjust it. But if you did it right, you should be able to pull this tight, and then you should be able to loosen it back up. And before we close it, this is a great time to pull it back at its tightest, because that's where it is at its longest length. And then you can slip it over your head to make sure that it can get over your head first, and then that you could pull it to the length you desire. So it went from being pretty long, as you see, to being much shorter. And I could get it even shorter, because I can go up until I hit this bead. So I could probably get it pretty tight. Now, if you were to have more beads over here, you'd be sort of limited by how long you can make it, how short you can make it. And so that is something to take into account. And that is also why you can use slip knots for bracelets, but it can be sort of hard. So if you're doing it for bracelets, you want to make sure you can always have it long enough to get over the thickest part of your hand, and that it will tighten up around your wrist. And the more beads you have on there, the less space that you'll have. So that is just something to take into account. And so now I'm going to show you how to finish off your slip knots. So there are many different ways that you could sort of completely finish this off. I like to keep my slip knots pretty much as simple as possible. So I'm going to leave them like this, and I'm going to wind up cutting this cord so that the knot is only visible. Now, there's also the option you could string a little bead on here and then tie a knot on after it, and that can give you a little pull tab, which some people find really helpful. Just keep in mind that you will see that little bead on your neck. So that may be both a benefit or a detraction depending on your personal aesthetic. Now, with the nylon, you could use a lighter, you could use fire, or use crazy glue. You can use the fire, like a little lighter, to burn the ends off, and to sort of solidify it, because the synthetic cord and nylon will melt. And you could really only do that on a very synthetic cord. On any other cord like leather or waxed cotton, you're going to have to use glue. Because burning it will just make it burn. It's not going to melt it. The synthetic materials will melt with the fire. So I'm going to use my handy dandy crazy glue. And so you're going to be very careful with your crazy glue to use a very light hand, because what we're essentially going to do is I'm going to cut off this little excess bit of cord here and very carefully glue that little end there, and then put glue very carefully on the seam lines, but we want to make sure that you get absolutely no glue on the cord that it's going to be sliding on. We just want to make sure you're solidifying the knot. And that can be a thing that's easy to mess up on. I do it often, and that you have to start over again with. And it could take a little bit of practice to get the feel of how to do that correctly. So I'm going to pop the lid off of my glue, and then I am going to use my cutters. And I have everything ready when I do this because I want to make sure that this doesn't loosen after I cut it. So I'm going to cut as close as I can to the end of that knot. And the first thing I'm going to do is take a little glue and very gently, and we're going to make sure that you have like a decent glue that doesn't spurt out because a big blob of glue will make it so that it doesn't slide. Though it is an option to use sliding knots just because they're attractive and not because you want them to slide. But if you put too much glue onto your sliding knots, it will make it so that your knots do not move. And so then I like to go in, let's see, this seam here, right in the crack again, very, very gently. I'm just sort of gently dabbing it, and right where the knot joins right here, just very, very gently doing that. Sometimes I give it a little tug to see if it still moves, and it still does, so I'm pretty sure that I'm safe. And then I go and I do the same thing on the other side. So again, I cut as close as I can to the end of my little knot there, and then very gently I'm making sure that I get glue just dabbing it on that little spot where it joins. You don't want to get any on this little cord right here because that will sort of stop it from moving. And then again, right in this little crease where the knot sort of joins, just a little teeny dab, and then I like to do it again right on that little spot right there. So you might get a little bit on your fingers, that's okay. It will wear off eventually. So voila, it still slides, and you're going to want to give it a minute to dry, but basically that is how you do slip knots. Alright, so I waited a minute to make sure that my glue dried, and then I pulled it so you can see it still functions. And now I'm going to give it a final trial and make sure it goes over my head and tighten it up. So voila, I have a pretty cool short little necklace. If I wanted to make it even shorter, sometimes you have to get in there with your fingers and sort of force it along. But that's a pretty cool little necklace, and you could wear it short, you could wear it long, you could do a lot with it. So basically, slip knots are awesome. You can have a lot of fun with them. And it is, again, one of those things that you might have to practice a little bit to get the feel right. But the great thing is that before you glue it, you can pretty much keep practicing unless like your cord gives out, depending on which cord you're using. But basically, just keep practicing, enjoy it. Let me know if there's any questions I could answer. It's my first time really teaching the slip knots, especially on this medium. So let me know if this all made sense to you. We can try it again if it didn't. And if you like our tutorials, you like our videos, remember to subscribe. And I'm going to be adding any notes that I can down in the description. Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.